You are already dead.
Huh, what did you?
Jigoku No Alice is a manga that I've recently been reading, and it's definitely not a manga that I would recommend, hence the title of the video. But if you're deprived of your humanity, then you should definitely check it out. Usually for these videos, I don't go too into the story or plot, but with this manga, I will. It's what makes this manga pretty interesting. But fair warning, because this manga isn't for everyone. And I'm not going to tell you that it's an absolute amazing manga and it would change your life. But this manga is pretty good. It's only for certain kind of readers, similar to how everyone recommends, in quotations, Goodnight Poon Poon, but in reality, they aren't really recommending it. Jigoku no Alice is set in a post-apocalyptic world. Civilization doesn't exist as we know it, and only communes exist, which are like cities for these people, and basic resources are hard to find. The world building for this manga isn't amazing or unique. There's a lot more similar stories, but it's pretty interesting. The characters in this manga behave more like animals than socialized people. That is pretty much the premise of it. I want to give a bit more praise and talk about the author of this manga, Jiro Matsumoto. He often uses war as a form of exploring the human soul and uses the characters as a representation of it, which a lot of people don't mention when talking about manga. You can read all the mangas that he made and created and you'll understand what I'm talking about. In this manga, he specifically achieves something. What he achieves? Well, I'll leave that to you to find out. This author made me want to create a video on just his work specifically, but I decided to do them individually and make a series on it. Okay, with getting that out the way, let's talk about the manga. The motivation behind this video is Shuu, the main character. He is an antisocial teenager and a thief who hunts down and kills scoundrels hundreds of yards away. He is a great marksman. He shines only when using a sniper and at long distance, obviously. He lives in the ruins of a large city which he calls Alamo. He knows this place like the back of his hand. He grabs weapons and materials and manga and puts them inside of his fort. Shuu lives all by himself, except he has a friend, and it's an android called Alice. Just like any other main character, he uses Alice as bait to kill people. Shu's character is what really drove me into reading this manga. I mean, he calls Alice dumb and broken, and even beats her when he's mad. But he protects her and always looks out for her, even killing for her. In the manga, there's a moment where Shuu is at a bar, and these four guys try to take Alice, and Shuu protects Alice, but gets beaten and even stripped of his clothes. He then later gets revenge by sniping the guy's hand off, right in front of his child and wife. Another instance, he's in a shootout and he's only able to shoot the enemy from a distance, but when one gets too close, he doesn't shoot. He says, "I can't shoot from this distance," and pisses his pants. And it's this fear of other people. That's why he can't bring himself to kill people if they are too close. This manga is basically Shu's confrontation with the need to be with others. Shuu saves a woman from scoundrels, her name being Matilda, and he agrees to work a season for her, mainly because he can't find any resources and she's a political leader of a big refuge community. This is where another topic is mentioned in this manga. How do you build an ideal political body? Well, don't read this manga. Matilda's work is basically keeping the peace within her community and the surrounding communities. This is where another issue comes up. When can humans trust each other? The answer is never. Shuu was somewhat safe where he was all by himself. The only problem was that he needed to always be working and basically dying in need for resources and for him to actually have some sort of motivation. But whenever he comes to this community, he doesn't need to get what he needs. All he has to do is walk there and he can buy it in exchange for money. Another issue regarding trust is born after and during times of war. Can people truly regain their morals and ethical behaviors? This is another question that pops up in this manga. Everyone knows what happens during these times. All the events and actions hurt the soul of the survivors. The mere sight of these events and actions can be called hell, hence the name. These events cause emotional scars and they take away most of what we call humanity. This takes place in a form of emotional trauma. This is where Shuu stands and lives. He was born in war and always known war. And that's where another question erupts. Is anyone bad enough to be considered unforgivable? In the first chapter of this manga, Shuu argues with Matilda and he explains, sure, killing humans are bad, even if the humans tried to kill and you. And I thought it was pretty interesting because he kind of does have a point. People's emotions get involved whenever someone you kill is either a bad human being or can they be forgiven. In this world that Shuu lives in, do humans possess humanity in this life of no peace? Do they? That is what Alice in Hell is, or Jigoku no Alice. This is where it stems away from your typical manga. This is hell. The author uses death, sex, and violence and abuse to highlight a lot of fairly existing topics. The violence in this manga is not heroic or meaningful. Just look at Sakamoto Days. The violence in that manga is cool and exciting, unlike Jigoku no Alice, which looks disturbing and unlikable. Maybe you might be saying it's because of the art style, and you kinda have a point, but at the same time, if you read this manga, you'll understand what I mean. And in certain moments when reading this manga, you might find that your emotions are kind of switched off. Like I mentioned before, Shuu gets beaten in a bar, and I felt bad for him. And usually when the main character gets beaten, they get revenge or justice, and it feels rewarding, but in this manga, it feels wrong. This is how Jigoku no Alice sticks out. The entire work explores the consequences of violence, dehumanization, and detachment from society. It does all of this while touching on personal issues like escapism, god complexes, and isolation. This manga of course takes place in a fictional story and world, but it's easy to compare it to now. Similar to Goodnight Poon Poon, even though it's not based on a true story, it can be read as one. A story of a kid who can't even believe his own parents, and we even see his mind state because it's a reflection of his character design. Sure, it may be a fictional story, but it's so realistic when it comes to the topics and moments in the story that can relate to people, and that's why so many people find that manga disturbing or depressing. This story can be read as a literal or, like normal people, a symbolic way, and it works either way. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the art. It's good, and I think the artist highlights the story even more with that art. It's almost like sketches which help and add to the tone of the manga even more. Like with Shuu and his mental issues, it feels quite realistic within the setting of the story. And it makes sense. There's a whole bunch of shootouts, and most of the teenagers want to join in on the fun. And there's a lot of death in this manga. Mostly, some of them aren't really needed for it. There's literally a huge accident that's caused from misunderstanding, and it causes countless of deaths. It has been a while since I read a manga like this with such a soul within its characters. I mentioned Shuu a lot in this video, and it's simple to say that he is flawed and kind of unlikable. You just feel bad for him most of the time. And I know I mentioned her once, but Alice, she is the soul of this manga. Alice represents everything Shuu deals with, his pain and suffering. She is a pure child. She is broken, and in a way that makes her pure. She mirrors Shuu's lack of childhood. Even in the first few pages, she's copying Shuu because he told her to. And she doesn't stop, and that causes Shuu to call her an idiot. Idiot! Alice and Shuu's relationship is what brings the story together. The message of pain, loss, acceptance, and those who will always live in denial made me realize a couple things. It's been a while since a manga has affected me, even though it isn't that long, and when reading I felt so connected to Shuu and Alice, which doesn't happen that often. Usually, you don't really relate to the cool and overpowered main character, even though you would like to. And the reason I titled the video the way I did was because I see self-reflection as a way to desensitize oneself, one's mind. Maybe it doesn't really make sense to you, but it does to me. Why do some people struggle to order food? Why do people struggle with phone calls? Why do people not formally greet new people? Maybe self-reflection can help desensitize your mind to become more open to these kinds of things. Well, I'm just ranting at this point. Check out the manga if you want. Remember, it isn't for everyone, and let me know what you guys think about the video. Feedback would be nice, and check out my other videos. I think they're great, and whatever you're doing, keep doing it. See you later.